My name is Jeff, and I live in Dayton, Ohio. I never considered myself a superstitious person. I'm a logical guy, always have been. But something happened to me last year that I can't explain, something that still sends chills down my spine when I think about it. It was a normal day, just like any other, but it ended with an experience I'll never forget. I was driving home with my 3-year-old son, Miles, in the back seat. It was a bright, sunny afternoon, and we had just finished visiting my parents. Miles was happily singing one of his favorite nursery rhymes, and I was enjoying the peace and quiet of the drive. As we passed by a modest cemetery on the outskirts of town, something strange happened. Miles suddenly stopped singing. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror, expecting to see him dozing off, but instead he was staring intently out the window. Then, out of nowhere, he pointed toward the cemetery and said, "Look at all those people." I frowned and turned my head to see what he was talking about. The cemetery was small, almost more like a garden, with only a few flowers and plaques scattered around. I didn't see anyone there. "What people, buddy?" I asked, trying to see what had caught his attention. He pointed again, more insistent this time. "All those people over there," he said, his little voice full of certainty. "There sure are a lot of grandmas." A chill ran down my spine. The cemetery was empty. There wasn't a soul in sight. I looked back at Miles, who was still staring out the window, his eyes wide and serious. "What are they doing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He replied, "They are all standing there, looking down at the grass," his tone eerily matter-of-fact. I didn't know what to say. My heart was racing, and a cold sweat had broken out on my forehead. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. "Okay, buddy, let's get home," I said, my voice shaking slightly. I pressed down on the accelerator, eager to put some distance between us and that cemetery. We drove the rest of the way in silence. I kept glancing back at Miles, who had returned to humming his song as if nothing had happened. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what he had said. Who were the people he saw? Why didn't I see them? And why did he call them grandmas? When we got home, I tried to shake off the feeling of unease that had settled over me. I told myself that Miles had just been imagining things, that it was nothing to worry about. But later that day, as I was sitting on the couch watching TV with him, he said something that made my blood run cold. He turned to me, his face serious, and said, "You know, they weren't alive." I stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. "What do you mean, Miles?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He said as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Those people we saw, they were all paused." I felt a chill run down my spine. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there, staring at my son, my mind racing. What did he mean by paused? Was he talking about the people in the cemetery? And how could he know they weren't alive? Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what Miles had said. Every time I looked at him, I wondered if he really had some kind of sixth sense, or if it was just his imagination. But the more I thought about it, the more unsettled I became. I started having trouble sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I would see those empty graves in the cemetery, and I would imagine the people Miles had described, standing there, staring down at the grass. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, something that wasn't quite human. One night, I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart racing. I had a nightmare about the cemetery. In the dream, I was standing in the middle of the graves, surrounded by shadowy figures. They were all staring at me with hollow, lifeless eyes, and I couldn't move. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I woke up just as one of the figures reached out to touch me, its hand cold as ice. After that, I started avoiding the cemetery. I would take the long way home, just to avoid driving past it. I didn't want to risk seeing anything, or worse, having Miles see something again. But no matter how hard I tried to forget, the memory of that day haunted me. A few weeks later, I was driving home late at night. I had stayed late at work and was exhausted, just wanting to get home and crawl into bed. I wasn't thinking about the cemetery or anything else. I was just focused on getting home. But as I turned onto the road that led past the cemetery, I felt a sudden sense of dread. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that I was just tired, but the feeling grew stronger as I got closer. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were white, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I was almost at the cemetery when something made me look out the window. Standing at the edge of the cemetery, right by the road, was a woman. She was wearing a long white dress, and her hair was dark and flowing. She was staring at me, her eyes empty and hollow. I slammed on the brakes, my heart leaping into my throat. But when I looked again, she was gone. I sat there in the middle of the road, my hands shaking, trying to catch my breath. I told myself that it was just my imagination, that I was just tired and seeing things. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I had seen her, just like Miles had seen those people. After that night, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was wrong with that cemetery, something dark and unnatural. I started doing some research, trying to find out if anyone else had experienced anything strange there, and what I found out only made things worse. It turns out that the cemetery has a dark history. It's been there for over 100 years, and there have been countless reports of strange sightings and unexplained occurrences. People have seen figures standing among the graves, heard voices when no one was around, and felt cold spots even on the warmest days. But the most disturbing thing I found out was that the cemetery is said to be haunted by the spirits of those who were buried there without a proper funeral. The cemetery was originally a potter's field, a place where the poor and the unknown were buried in unmarked graves. It's said that their spirits are restless, doomed to wander the cemetery for eternity. I don't know if that's true, but after what I've experienced, I wouldn't be surprised. I try not to think about it too much, but every now and then I can't help but wonder if Miles really did see something that day, something that I wasn't meant to see. I still avoid that road whenever I can. I've never driven past the cemetery again, and I don't plan to. But no matter how hard I try to forget, the memory of that day still haunts me. Sometimes, late at night, I'll hear Miles talking in his sleep, and I'll wonder if he's dreaming about those people, those grandmas he saw in the cemetery. Even though time has passed, that day remains etched in my memory, an unsettling reminder that there are things in this world we can't always explain. Whether it was a child's imagination or something more, I may never know for sure. But one thing is certain. The moment you experience something like this, your perspective on reality changes forever. Now, whenever I pass a cemetery or hear a child speak of things unseen, I can't help but wonder if there's more to this world than meets the eye. Maybe it's best if we don't look too closely. Thanks for watching. If you've had a terrifying experience of your own or heard about a chilling incident from someone else, I'd love to hear it. Drop your story in the comments or send it over to us. And who knows, your tale could be featured in an upcoming episode. Make sure to hit subscribe and tap the bell icon so you don't miss out on more haunting stories just like this one. And if this episode gave you a good scare, give it a thumbs up and share it with others who love a good fright. Stay tuned for more stories that will keep you up at night. Until next time, stay safe and beware of what you might see when you're not looking. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.